that you were thinking of us as your instruments in reaching out to the needy. Yes, there were times when we fed the hungry and sent used clothes to the victims of disasters. And we thought that that was good enough. We didn't realize that we have more to give than bags of rice or packs of dried fish. We have more than little loans for small and medium enterprises. We have more than taxes paid and tax-exempted gifts. We have more than 5 or 6 college scholarships, or 1 or 2 school buildings named after us. Lord, we have you within us. That burst of joy in compassion, that is you within us. That surge of creativity and innovation, that is you within us. That spark of generosity to our workers, that too is you within us. That glow in our face when we thank the lowest janitor, that is you within us. That warmth in our hands when we pray for a sick employee, Lord, that is you within us. That eureka, when we gather reliable data and perform honest analysis and recommend constructive strategies, Lord, that is your grace working within us. That delight of the soul when we engage in agricultural production, urban space renewal, and reforestation of denuded mountains. That is you making us partners in your continuing creation. That fire in our hearts when we sing our national anthem with conviction and commitment to really serve the country, your beloved people, with all our virtues and vices, values and vials, with all our visionaries as well as villains, that too, Lord, is you within us and around us. So, Lord, bless this meeting, Lord. May our exchange of views be an act of love, a sharing in your love, and a service to the people whom you love. Amen. God.
Bayang magiliw, pelas ng silanganan, alam ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyat ka ng magiging, sa manlulupi, di ka pasisingin, sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bakaw, may nilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal, ang kisag ng matawat mo'y tagumpay na nagdidinig, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di manigilig, lupa ng araw ng walhati pagsinta, buhay ay langit sa piling mo, aming ligaya na pag may mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Isang mapagpalayang araw po sa inyong lahat. Narito ulit tayo sa isa na namang serye ng Tapatan Media Forum. Nais kong batiin muli ang ating mga viewers sa FB Live at live streaming sa YouTube. Last week po ay napakaraming nakapanood sa atin. Sana ay malagpasan natin ngayong araw ang number of viewers last week. Magandang umaga din po sa ating mga kapatid sa media na naririto ngayon. Last week po ay tinalakay natin ang paksang nakaw na yaman. Ngayon naman po ay ating sasagutin ang mga sumusunod na mga tanong. Una po, golden era nga ba ng Pilipinas ang panahon ng martial law? Pangalawa, ano ang lagay ng kabuhayan ng mga tao ngayong pandemya? At ang pinakamahalagang tanong po, sino kaya sa mga kandidato natin ang may pinakamagandang plano sa pagbangon ng ating ekonomiya? Para sa tapatan din natin ngayon, inimbitahan po natin ang mga kilalang ekonomista sa ating bansa. Ang unang panauhin natin na magsasalita ngayong umaga ay si Professor JC Punong Bayan. Siya ay mangunguna sa isang diskusyon tungkol sa totoong kalagayan ng ekonomiya noong panahon ng martial law. Ang susunod naman po ay si Mr. Andrew Masigan, political analyst at kolumnista ng Philippine Star, na magtatalakay sa income inequality sa kasalukuyan. At ang panghuli po ay walang iba kundi si Professor Winnie Munsod na magsasalita tungkol sa kung sino ba sa mga kandidato natin ngayon ang may pinakamagandang plano para ibangon ang ating lugmok na ekonomiya sa panahon ng pandemya. Makakasama din po natin sa araw na ito si BSP Deputy Governor Diwa Ginigundo, isang bayan convener, upang makibahagi sa diskusyon bilang reactor bago magtapos ang ating programa. We also would like to acknowledge the presence of our conveners in Sambayan, Ombudsman Conchita Carpio Morales, Attorney Howie Calleja, and Father Albert Alejo, SJ. Ayan po, simulan na po natin ang ating tapatan ngayong araw. Professor Punong Bayan, you have now the floor.
Maraming salamat, JP, at maraming salamat sa Sambayan sa oportunidad para mag-share ng ilang ideas tungkol sa martial law economics. Gusto nating malaman ano ba yung mga economic issues na importante ngayong halalan ngayong 2022, at lumalabas na isa sa pinaka-importanting issue pala ay patungkol sa kasaysayan natin. Particularly yung golden age myths, kasi alam natin na si Bongbong Marcos ay isa sa frontrunners sa eleksyon ngayon, at marami nagsasabi na golden age ang panahon ng tatay niya bilang diktador ng Pilipinas at kailangan ibalik ang mga Marcos sa Malacanang. Pero kailangan i-fact check ito at tingnan natin kung totoo ba gamit ang datos at ang mga pag-aaral na marami nang naisulat actually tungkol dito, at tingnan natin ano yung mga kalimitang myths na sinishare at kung totoo ba sila. Binigay sa akin ni JP ay 7 to 8 minutes lang. Actually, isang buong semestre itong tinatalakay sa UP School of Economics. Pero sige, tingnan natin kung makakapture natin yung myths and how to debunk them. Unang-una, may mga nagsasabi na richest country in Asia daw ang Pilipinas noong martial law. At yun ang isa sa mga pinaka-importanting punto doon sa Golden Age myths. Pero kung titingnan natin yung datos mula sa Penn World Table 10.0 na pinakamagandang comparison ng mga bansa across time and across countries, noong 1965 pa lang ay mas mayaman na sa atin in terms of GDP yung Japan, China, India, and Indonesia. Samantalang in terms of real GDP per person, or kung hatiin natin yung GDP sa lahat ng tao sa Pilipinas o sa isang bansa, mas mayaman na sa atin yung Japan, Hong Kong at Singapore. At over time ay parami yung mga bansa na mas mayaman sa atin. Ang ibig sabihin nito ay nabaguhulihan yung Pilipinas mula 1965 hanggang 1985. Ito yung mga taon ng Marcos years. Pinapakita naman ng graph na ito na talagang makikita mo na noong 1950s and 1960s medyo nangunguna pa tayo sa ASEAN region. Pero nakita nyo naman na mas flat yung pagtaas ng kita ng bawat Pilipino sa Pilipinas kumpara sa ibang mga karating na bansa. At over time ay napaghulihan tayo, for example, ng Malaysia, Thailand at Indonesia. At ngayon ay mabilis na nakakahabol ang Laos, PDR at Vietnam. At may nagsasabi nga na baka mas mayaman na yung Vietnam sa atin sa panahon ngayon. So sa mga pag-aaral na nakita natin, lumalabas na ang mabagal na pag-unlad ng Pilipinas kumpara sa mga karatig bansa nito, ang isang pinaka-importanting dahilan dito ay yung mga maling polisiya noong batas militar. Myth number 2, marami nagsasabi na napakalakas ng piso kontra sa dolyar noong martial law. Sinasabi na ang isang dolyar ay katumbas ng 1.5 peso hanggang 2 pesos. Pero actually, kaisang tingin mo lang sa datos, makikita mo na hindi ito totoo. Noong palang December 1965, kung kailan unang nag-oath-taking si Pangulong Marcos sa kanyang first term, ay ang piso actually ay ang dolyar ay katumbas na ng 3.9 pesos. So hindi kasing lakas ng 1.5 or 2. At ang mas importanteng punto ay sa paglipas ng panahon ay lalong humina ang piso kontra sa dolyar. Pero actually ang konteksto nito ay kailangan i-devalue or pahinain talaga yung piso. Masyadong malakas ito at hindi sustainable, at nagdudulot ito ng kakulangan ng dolyar at international reserves na naging isa sa mga malimit na problema noong martial law. Marami mga actually malalim na diskusyon ito pero gusto lang natin i-fact check muna sa ngayon na hindi nga ganong kalakas at lalong humina ang piso sa paglipas ng panahon during martial law. At isa sa mga rationale or dahilan kung bakit pinanatiling malakas ang piso noon ay gustong gawing mura ang imports. At mura ang imports ay marami mga domestic industries ang lalago. At over time may inaasahan na sila ay makakapag-export ng mga produkto abroad. Pero ang nangyari ay hindi ito nangyari. Lumalabas na kumpara sa Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand at South Korea. For example, yung manufacturing sa bansa ay hindi umunlad kumpara sa mga bansang ito. So hindi nakamit yung objective na palakasin yung export industry ng bansa. Myth number 3, ito iuuso rin ito na myth, golden age daw ito ng infrastructure, yung martial law. And to be fair, maraming mga istruktura nga naman ang nagawa. Pero ang importanteng punto dito ay marami dito sa mga infrastruktura na ito ay debt driven. Ibig sabihin ay pinondohan sila ng mga utang mula sa ibang bansa, sa abroad. At ang mas malala dito ay, alam naman natin na hindi masamang umutang as long as yung mga pupuntahan ng inutang mo ay magandang mga investments. Pero doon pa lang sa white paper ng mga profesor ng UP School of Economics na kasama doon si Professor Monsod na nandito sa atin sa ngayon sa forum na ito, sinabi nila noon nung kasagsagan ng krisis pang ekonomiya ng bansa na the bulk of construction and other capital outlays in both the private and public sectors were not very productive and many were outright wasteful. Ibig sabihin na sayang yung pera na ginastos para sa mga proyektong infrastruktura na ito. Maraming over-designed bridges, highways, public buildings, or large energy projects designed to secure a political constituency to get a commission or to corner a contract. So kinurakot pa yung marami sa mga proyektong ito at ang pinakamagandang example dito yung Bataan Nuclear Power Plant kung saan ito ay binroker ng isa sa mga crony ni Marcos, si Herminio Dicini, at mismong si Marcos ay nakakuha ng milyong-milyon na dolyar bilang komisyon sa proyektong ito. Sinabi rin ng mga ekonomista ng UP na in a number of instances, though the outward purpose of projects might be endowed with some plausible or social justification, a more urgent reason for pursuing them was the opportunity to use government activity as a private vehicle for private gain, whether pecuniary or political. So, and isa pa, by the way, ang sa mga dahilan kung bakit marami mga proyekto ay gustong ipakita sa mundo na maunlad na yung Pilipinas sa bagong lipunan. In fact, marami sa mga infrastructure projects din ang itinayo in time for the visits of certain dignitaries or international leaders. Pero ayun sa ilalim ng ganong klaseng outward appearance ay alam natin na marami ang nakurakot dito sa mga proyektong infrastruktura na ito. At nakita nga natin na talagang lumobo ang utang ng bansa sa panahon ng martial law to the level na hindi na talaga siya sustainable. So sa loob ng 10 taon lang mula 1972 hanggang 1982, yung utang panlabas ng Pilipinas ay lumaki ng tumataginting na $21.73 billion. Sobrang bilis ng pag-accumulate natin ng utang at it took us several years to pay these loans. Myth number 4, Marcos fought the oligarchs. So meron din ganitong klaseng naratibo na lumalabas sa social media sa ngayon. Pero bagamat marami sa mga old elite noong unang bahagi ng 20th century ang talagang pinahirapan at hindi talaga lumago ang kanilang mga negosyo sa panahon ng martial law, ay nagtatag naman ng crony capitalism ang rehimeng Marcos, kung saan si Marcos, ang kanyang pamilya at ang kanilang mga cronies, sila naman yung namuno sa maraming mga industriya kung saan marami ding nakurakot at maraming mga profits na nakuha sila mula sa mga industriya na ito. Sa isang 1998 interview nga, sinabi pa ni Imelda na we practically own everything in the Philippines. Parang proud pa sila no? At hanggang sa ngayon ay kita natin yung influensya ng pamilyang Marcos at ng kanilang mga cronies sa ating ekonomiya. Pero ayun sa likod ng crony capitalism na yun ay naging bihikulo yun para sa talagang katakot-takot na korupsyon. At yung gobyerno nga ay nakakuha na siya ng mahigit 171 billion pesos ng ill-gotten wealth ng mga Marcos at kanilang mga crony. And in fact, maganda yung discussion noong isang bayan na nung nakarang linggo. Marami akong natutunan doon. Pero nakita rin natin na yung gobyerno ay may hinahabol pa siya na halos 126 billion pesos ng ill-gotten wealth. At ito ay hindi katang-isip lang, kundi ay napatunayan na ng Korte Suprema na talagang merong ill-gotten wealth at hanggang ngayon ay marami pang kailangang habulin. In fact, merong ng Guinness World Record si Ferdinand Marcos doon sa greatest robbery of a government daw. I think magandang parang example ito or magandang meme ito na i-share sa mga kabataan kasi madali silang makaka-relate. Myth number 5, nobody went hungry during martial law. Inalagaan daw ni Pangulong Marcos ang mga Pilipino at masaya ang buhay noon na mababa ang presyo ng mga bilihin, may mga nagsasabi na libre ang tubig at kuryente. Imagine yung ganong klaseng ka-absurd na mga myths, talagang lumalaganap siya ngayon at maraming naniniwala. Pero nakita natin na yung inflation rate or yung bilis ng pagtaas ng presyo ng mga bilihin ay umabot siya sa pinakamataas na level, lumagpas siya ng 50% noong 1984. At ito yung may kinalaman dito dun sa mabilis na pag-devalue ng piso dahil kailangan nang gawin yon at dahil dun nga sa sa chronic na shortage ng dollars. Pero dahil sa biglaang pag-devalue ng piso ay nagdulot yun ng mas mataas na presyo ng mga imports and other effects, kaya pumalo sa 50% ang inflation rate. Sobrang bilis nun. Kasi sa ngayon, ano bang inflation rate? Naglalaro sa 3%, 4%, pero naghihirap na tayo ngayon. Marami ng mga nahihirapan at umaaray. Pero imagine, 50% inflation rate at sa taong yun ay may mga buwan pa na umabot ng 60%. Hindi nakagulat-gulat na habang sobrang bilis ng taas ng presyo ng bilihin ay marami mga naghirap, maraming hindi naka-afford ng kumain ng 3 beses sa isang araw at yung poverty incidence o yung porsyento ng mga mahihirap sa Pilipinas ay talagang pumalo, especially nung crisis years nung 1980s. Yung Nutriban, Diyos ko, marami ding naniniwala na proyekto ito ni Pangulong Marcos. Pero in fact, ito ay proyekto ng USAID. At meron namang ipinamudmod ng mga Nutriban talaga at nakatulong ito sa mga tao. Maraming nagre-reminisce na, nakakain ako ng Nutriban. Pero of course, ginamit din ito sa politika. For example, may mga bagyo noong 1970s kung saan yung mga supot ng Nutriban, nung namimigay sila ng Nutriban sa mga nasalanta ng bagyo, ay may nakalagay doon na courtesy of Imelda Marcos, Tulungan Project. Yung mga ganun ba? Hindi na kagulat-gulat yun, pero ganun. May ganong klaseng myth na parang pag sinabing Marcos, Nutriban, walang naghirap. May ganong klaseng chain of reasoning na kailangan i-debunk. And then of course, meron yung infamous na Negros Island famine noong mid-1980s kung saan at least 190,000 sugar workers ang nawala ng trabaho, affecting 1 million dependents, and every 5th child on the island under 6 was found to be seriously malnourished. At isa nga sa poster child ng Negros Island famine, if you could call it, that would be si Joel Abong na nakita nyo na butot balat. At marami pang ibang ranas ng ganong klaseng matinding gutom noong martial law. So imagine a famine happening right now in 2022, parang hindi siya imaginable, di ba? Pero nangyari talaga siya noong mid-1980s, especially sa Negros. In part because of the economic crisis at in part dun sa crony capitalism dun sa sugar industry na magandang discussion din sana pero wala tayong masyadong oras. Ayun lang, yun ay flavor lang ng mga Marcos myths. Napakarami pa. In fact, I'm finishing a book on this topic right now. Pero sinabi ko, isang buong semestre itong tinatalakay sa UP School of Economics. Napakarami pang mga kailangang i-discuss. Pero I think kailangan talaga nating trabahuhin na i-debunk ang mga myth na ito dahil napakalaganap niya ngayon sa social media. Maraming naniniwala at napaka-importanting issue na ito sa paparating na halalan. So, yung mga facts ba ay gumagana sa maraming tao? Not always. In fact, may mga pag-aaral
Ayan, nakat po si Sir JC. I think nagkaroon po ng
Hindi
technical.
sila talaga na-persuade sa ganun. Persuade ang mga tao. If not using rin noong Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Okay, all right. We can hear you, Sir JC.
Ayan, well, I was just finishing up after nung discussion kay Joel Abong. Sinasabi ko lang na talagang kailangan nating i-debunk yung mga myth dahil maraming lumalaganap ngayon at maraming naniniwala. Yung mga myth na yun ba ay laging gumagana? Not always, pero kailangan nating mag-try na mag-persuade ng mga tao using these facts or yung mga stories behind martial law. Kailangan talaga natin yung i-hammer home yung ganong mga fact na hindi golden age ng Pilipinas ang martial law. Maraming salamat, JP.
Thank you very much, Professor JC Punong Bayan, for debunking the golden age myths by presenting to us facts or mga datos. Ayan po mga kababayan, huwag kaagad tayong maniniwala sa social media. Diyos ko po, i-fact check po natin, tingnan po natin yung mga datos kung ang sinasabi ng social media ay totoo ba ito. Kasi po, baka ito po ay kagagawan lamang ng mga trolls at ito ay mga fake news po lamang. So thank you very much, Professor Punong Bayan, for showing us the facts that debunk that the martial law years are not the golden age of the Philippines. Okay, our next speaker po, walang iba kundi si Mr. Andrew Masigan. Sir Andrew, the floor is yours.
Thank you, JP, for the introduction earlier. Let me share my screen now. Okay, and let me expand this. All right. So good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Masigan. I am an economist and also a columnist for the Philippine Star and Business World. What I'm going to talk to you today about is what I think is a social time bomb. Okay, because although the economy had grown between 1986 to today, all right, and there was real wealth generated during this time. Okay, the problem that we face today is income inequality. Okay, and that is what I am going to speak about now. Okay. So income inequality is the gap in the distribution of wealth among members of the population. Now, how exactly can you quantify how acute income inequality is in as far as the Philippines is concerned? Well, there's an economic numerical quotient that we use to measure income inequality. And this is called the Gini Coefficient. Okay, it's a single number that demonstrates the degree of inequality or the distribution of wealth within a population. The higher the number or the percentage, the higher the inequality. Okay, so let's look at where the Philippines stands today in relation to ASEAN 6. So you'll see that our Gini coefficient is the highest among the 6 largest economies in ASEAN. So we're at 41.58%. Now for context, right? The country with the highest Gini coefficient or the most acute income inequality is South Africa at 63%. And that's because they're still suffering from the aftermaths of apartheid. We are at 41.58%, at par with most African countries in as far as income inequality is concerned. Now, let's try to put more meat, or let me help you visualize more where how income is distributed in the economy. This is how the wealth of the country is distributed among our population. All right. So the Philippine Institute of Development Studies determined that for a family of 5, okay, the poverty line is at about 10,481 pesos per month. That's the income, no, to sustain a family of 5. Now, with the advent of COVID, those below the poverty line had increased to 22%. We were already at 17% before COVID, but it was exacerbated now, and it stands at 22% poverty rate. Now, you'll see that there is a low income class, and that's 36%, those earning between 10 to 21,000 a month. And then you have a wide spectrum of those in the middle class. And together, okay, the middle class constitutes 40%. But like I said, that's a wide spectrum, no? So this is people earning anywhere from 21,000 all the way to 125,000. And you'll see that the upper middle class, or those who earn between 73,000 to 125,000, are only 4% of the population. Interestingly too, that those below the poverty line and the low income class, which is the majority of voters, as we know, constitute 58% of the population. So really, this is where, let me segue into the campaign. No? This is where the communication and the narratives should really focus on. Now, the upper class, or those who earn 125,000 to 209,000, is only 1%, okay, of the population. And those who are rich, who earn 209,000 and above, are less than 1%. Altogether, that's only 143,000 families. It's a very, very slim segment of our population. Now, the thing about income inequality is that its disadvantages, okay, are very poignant and very threatening, okay? And when I say threatening, it's because, wait, let me, hold on. Okay, these are the disadvantages of acute income inequality, all right? So you have social tension, okay? Low average, okay, heightened political inequality, low average education levels, low technology adoption, low labor productivity, poor public health, high crime rates, high dependence on state subsidies, and the crowding out of the middle class. Now, let me explain something here. Social tension and the crowding out of the middle class are related, because in a society like ours, where you have 58% of the population below the poverty line or in the lower income bracket, the subsidies of government are concentrated on this sector. Meaning to say, when you talk about financial amelioration, when you talk about subsidies for education, for housing, for healthcare, the beneficiaries here are normally or usually the poor and the lower income class. There's a crowding out of the middle class. They are left out. And historically, you'll see that discontent, social discontent, and revolutions among societies have always been powered by the middle class, not the lower class. So that's what I mean by social tension and the crowding out of the middle class. An acute income inequality translates to lower labor productivity, lower long-term GDP growth rates, and a heavy public welfare burden. Now, let's see. We're talking about the economy now, right? So let's see where incomes are, how incomes are distributed within the economy, all right? So 22.86% of our workforce are in the agricultural sector. And if you look at the average household income per month of workers in the agricultural sector, you'll see that they fall below minimum, the poverty line. Meaning to say, the majority of our agricultural workers are in subsistence level or below subsistence level. The majority of our workforce belong to the service industry, and they earn an average of 16,754 pesos per month. This is just slightly, about 19% above minimum wage. So those working in the service sector, your bellhops, your waiters, your cashiers, your retail people, okay, even bank tellers, they cannot be considered high income or way above the poverty line, they're really just subsisting. The sector that's earning the most within the economy are those involved in industry. In other words, factory workers, those involved in logistics, those involved in the maritime industry. Their average income is 26,019 pesos per month. Now, as we move forward in the new administration, okay, like I said, there's a lot of threat, okay? There's a big threat and many disadvantages that acute income inequality brings, okay? And so the challenge here, okay, given the fact, given the income distribution of the workers in the agricultural sector, in the service sector, in the industrial sector, the challenge before the next administration is to migrate as much of those in subsistence farming or the agricultural sector and those earning minimum wage in the service sector, migrate them to the industrial sector. That is the economic prescription followed by most countries, particularly in our region, who have transcended or who have improved their income distribution. Okay, so this is the challenge that faces the next administration. And to achieve this, we have to abandon Dutertenomics and embrace rapid industrialization. There's just no way out of it. We have to rapidly industrialize to diffuse the wealth of the economy. Now, what is wrong with Dutertenomics in the first place? At the heart of Dutertenomics is firing up the economy through consumer spending. Consumer spending was fueled, okay, by high government spending on infrastructure, on social amelioration, etc. Okay, but the thing is, okay, under Dutertenomics, financing, okay, for government spending was done through debt. So it's quite similar to the Marcos model in that sense. No? It's a debt-driven model. Dutertenomics failed because although consumer spending increased, it was not followed by a corresponding growth in the manufacturing sector. You'll see that the manufacturing sector peaked in 2017 when its growth was faster than the service sector. After that, it was on a steep decline. So we must abandon Dutertenomics, okay, and firing the economy through consumer spending via debt and embrace rapid industrialization. There's just no way out of it. And I propose a 5-point plan. Okay, first is to relaunch the Manufacturing Resurgence Program. And this was initiated in 2013 under the Pinoy administration, headlined by, I remember, Secretary Greg Domingo. This was one of his pet projects. And under this, he developed 60 industry roadmaps, okay, to take our industries in which we have a competitive advantage in, from infancy stage to maturity stage, okay? The Duterte administration have somehow put this in the back burner, okay? We must develop more PESA zones. Yes, we have 300 plus PESA zones, but they're all in vertical buildings. We need more sprawling industrial zones, okay? We must fill the gaps in the supply chain. The reason, for instance, why we can't produce an automobile is because although we do the stamping, we do the wire harnesses, and we do the transmission, we do the battery, we don't do the engine, we don't do the chassis, we don't do the electronics. And these are the supply chain gaps that we must fill, okay? We have to upgrade our investment incentives to competitive levels. There has been some improvement here with the passage of the CREATE law. We must maintain infrastructure spending at 5% of GDP, but with emphasis on logistic gaps. We must revive the National Competitiveness Council. It was abandoned by the Duterte administration and given to the Anti-Red Tape Authority. But unfortunately, under the ARTA, the Philippines has plunged in most competitiveness indices in the last 4 years, okay? And we must capacitate our workers through STEM learning and accelerate the One Town One product program. Okay, now I know I have a time limit, so I'm going to speed up my presentation. So the next thing we have to do, and this is point 2 of the 5-point plan, is to diversify the economy from one that produces only 5% of products a day. In other words, we can only competently produce and export 500 products today, as opposed to the Asian average of economies that can produce 2,000 products. So look, there's no way out of it. We need the base industries, okay? And when I talk about base industries, we're talking about petrochemicals, metals, textiles, petroleum, precision machines, wire harnesses, glass and lenses, and energy, and rubber, okay? It is incumbent upon the next administration, okay, to revive or to recapacitate these industries, all right? Now, I'd like to recommend and bring forward this next point, which is those holders, and these are conglomerates, no? The Metro Pacifics and the Ayalas and the ICTSIs of this world, all of them are holders, okay, of national franchises. I recommend that holders of national franchises be made to integrate backward or forward just to fire up or to help fire up our manufacturing resurgence. Example, for holders of franchise, water franchises, they must be made to invest in hydropump and metal PVC pipe manufacturing. Those who hold franchises in power distribution must invest in electric poles and conduction wire manufacturing. Those given franchises in railways must invest in ballast, sleeper plates. And those who operate tollways must invest in metal beams and cement. I find it inequitable. That, let me go back here. I find it inequitable that certain conglomerates, okay, like the biggest conglomerate, all right, in the economy today, has a gross revenue of $32 billion across all its holdings, okay? However, this conglomerate's contribution to the economy, to employment, is only 30,000 heads. There's a big disproportion here, no? So my recommendation is for conglomerates such as these ones, okay, to be incentivized or enjoined to invest in base industries or key industries like metal, petrochemical, and glass and lenses. Okay, now there are many inefficient industries protected by law. Example, the local shipping lines must be opened up, okay? Importers of mass market but high ticket items such as motorcycles, okay, must be made to integrate backwards, all right? Motorcycle importers, I recommend, must invest in exchange for their permit to import, must invest in basic diesel and petrol piston engines, chassis manufacturing, and metal stamping. Okay, so next. All right. Now, when Ma'am Lenny published her Trabaho para sa Lahat or Hanap Buhay para sa Lahat program, I was happy to find that she included many industries in which the Philippines has a competitive advantage. So in her plan, she already included the industries that we can develop to take the economy a step further. And principal among this, and I've always been an advocate of this, is the blue economy. And when you talk about the blue economy, you talk about maritime industries. So given our strategic place in the world trade superhighway, okay, there's no reason why the Philippines cannot be a logistics hub. We can be a center for shipbuilding and repair. we can be a leader, or we already are a leader, but we have to solidify our leadership in maritime manning, in aquaculture, in local shipping lines, okay? And we have to revise our maritime laws, because the cabotage law precludes Philippine vessels under Philippine flag to do international shipping, and that has made us dependent on international shipping lines, which is wrong in terms of in a national security viewpoint. Natural gas exploration as well. Okay, Ma'am Lenny included this in her program, which is to climb the technology and value chain in the IT KPO space. I'm happy to report that at least under this administration, the Center for Artificial Intelligence was established, okay? And the whole idea of this, okay, is to make the Philippines a producer and programmer of all things that utilize artificial intelligence. So we're in the right road, or the right track, and as far as AI is concerned and IT KPO is concerned, okay? So Ma'am Lenny also indicated that she would like to make the Philippines a center of climate industries. And among these, okay, is the manufacturing of electric vehicles. Currently, there are already 54 manufacturers and importers of EV parts and components. This is something that we can expand further. We must reactivate the mining industry. This wasn't mentioned in Ma'am Lenny's program, but FYI, copper, nickel, and cobalt, and lithium, okay, are key ingredients in the manufacturing electric-driven vehicles and machines. And the Philippines is in pole position to be the world's leader in supplying these minerals. Okay, so it's a good thing that EO 130 was Executive Order 130 superseded EO 79, which means mining licenses are being issued again, which is a positive thing. Okay, we must develop as well, okay, our agro-processing industries, coconut, sugar, cocoa milk, etc. I'm going to move faster because I'm running out of time. Okay, auto and auto parts is another industry in which we have a competitive advantage. Aeronautics and aerospace. Okay, we may not be aware, but the Philippines is already a supplier of aerospace products, and we have an advantage here because of our numerous aerospace engineers. We realized 470 million in exports out of this last year, but this can be expanded further. Okay, next generation semiconductor and electronics. Okay, we cannot do this alone. We need foreign direct investments because they bring in technology, they bring in capital, and all of this will help balance our budget. Now, this is our take in foreign direct investments from 2010 to 2015. You'll see that our share was so minimal at only 3.1% of the total ASEAN share of foreign direct investments. Okay, this was 2010 to 2015. Our share increased between 2016 to 2022 to 5.9%, but still so far behind. Okay, okay, I'm gonna go very quickly here. So, fundamental is to restore trust in government. Okay, and we must open up the economy. This 60-40 rule in terms of equity ownership must be amended. All right, and especially in terms of knowledge-based industries, because if we want to be a player in knowledge-based industries, we must be more open to foreign direct investors at more than 60% equity. Okay. The good news is that the Retail Trade Liberalization Act has been passed. That's a positive thing. Okay. The Public Services Act passed in both houses as well, waiting to be signed into law. And the Foreign Investment Act passed also in both houses. So this is a good thing, no? So slowly our economy is being opened up, okay? But there's other reforms that need to be done, okay? Primary of which all right, is to fix the inconsistent and unpredictable treatment of investors, especially the tax authorities. And this is most evident in the refunds of VAT. Okay, so a lot of foreign investments don't come to the Philippines because of the uncertainty of getting their VAT refunds. Okay, and I'm going to leave this slide here. I'll share it with you later, and you can just read through the other reforms necessary. Okay, I'm running out of time, but this is the most important for me. All right, I think that the Board of Investments is good as a policy-making body, but we need a new office to champion outward missions to get foreign direct investments, and this is patterned after Invest Vietnam. I propose the establishment of the Office of Strategic Investments and Promotions and Economic Coordination (OSI) to be under the Office of the President. Okay, and like I said, it will aggressively undertake outbound investment missions, provide investor-concerned services for ease and entry, oversee industrial planning, okay, and lead in reforms towards economic competitiveness. I see this as the gaping hole in our industrial plan. Again, we can't do without FDIs, and I think the establishment of OSI will be the shot in the arm that the Philippines needs to get its fair share of foreign direct investments. So the faster we undertake the 5-point plan, the faster we industrialize. The faster we industrialize, the faster we distribute wealth and achieve greater income inequality. So that ends my presentation. Thank you very much for the time and the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andrew Masigan, for the very interesting presentation. Ayan po mga kababayan, numbers don't lie. Ang sabi nga po sa Tagalog, hindi raw po nagsisinungaling ang mga numero. At ang sinasabi ng mga numero sa atin ngayon, 22% po ng ating population is living below the poverty line na may kita lamang ng 10,481 pesos per month. Bago po tayo magtuloy sa ating isa na namang speaker, we want to acknowledge po Vice President Lenny Robredo, who is watching our program for today. So kaway-kaway po, VP Lenny, thank you for watching us this morning. Ayan. Finally, ang ating next speaker po, walang iba kundi si Professor Winnie Monsod. Professor Monsod, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me share. I'm having trouble sharing. Okay. Okay. Magandang umaga po, Vice President, Mrs. Next President. Okay. Ang topic is who can save our economy? Tayo muna, hindi lang ekonomiya natin ang may problema. Ang ating bansa may problema. That's our first and foremost problem. Ang outline po ng aking sasabihin is, pag-uusapan natin muna ang state of the economy. You know, what economy are we saving? What is the state of the economy? What is the state of the nation? Why do we need to save it? Then we will ask the question, who can fix both? Who can fix the economy? Who can fix the nation? And these are divided into dalawang questions. Which candidate has an economic, have good economic or development programs? And second question is, you can have a good program, but which candidate can successfully implement the program? Those are the two questions that are entailed in that the candidate who can fix both. State of the economy, alam nyo, bibilisan ko, the Philippines will achieve its 2019 GDP only in the third quarter or fourth quarter of 2022. That is longer than the Asian 5 average. The Philippines will thus have lost roughly 3 years of GDP. And then in terms of per capita income, because lumalaki ang population natin, we will have lost 4 years. And in terms of per capita household final consumption expenditures, we will have lost 5 years. Ang kung nakuha dito, This is from the national income accounts. All right? Ano pa? You know, the economy has actually been decelerating during the Duterte administration. Tingnan nyo lang, ito, 6.9% in the first half of 2016, and then we went down to 6.1% by 2019. Of course, 2020 was a disaster, and 2021 we have 5.1%, right? All right. Let me tell you that the government really is aware of this, because the government agency itself, this is the NEDA, in its study on COVID, you know, the total cost of COVID, tignan nyo ang sinabi nila. We will have lost, in 2020, we lost 4.3 trillion. That's about 25% of our GDP, of our total GDP. 4.3 trillion pesos. This is not my estimates. This is the NEDA estimates that can be seen in the NEDA website. All right, and they said in the long run we'll lose 37.5. But imagine this, sabi nila, our consumption and investment. Andrew was talking about investment, etc., and etc. We will be lower, sabi nila, in the next 10 years due to the lower demand in sectors that require social distances, etc. So therefore, our taxes will be lower, and sinabi pa nila, the economy is expected to converge in terms of investment only after 10 years. This is the state of the economy you're looking at. And this is not what I'm saying. This is what the government is saying, but it does not seem to come out. And the workers' productivity will be lower due to death, illness, etc. That is the key findings of the study of the NEDA. All right. To illustrate this consumption at this investment will be lower, tignan nyo ang binigay nila. All right. It may take 10 years to catch up to the pre-COVID industry. Wag ho kayong matakot, Madam Lenny. All right. This is what we should have been. This is what our trajectory should have been, investment. And this is what the best, you know, the minimum losses from COVID assures you, and this is the maximum losses. And he says, you know, it may take 10 years, ayan, hanggang 2030, mga anak. All of you might as well be my children. Okay? That's it. And this is government estimate. This is not, I want to say this because everybody says, oh, Mrs. Monsod, you know, just criticize. This is the government criticizing itself. Only nobody pays attention, or it is hidden. All right? All right. So that's the state of the economy. 10 years to achieve the investment growth, and the government is saying this. What are the recommendations? Strong recovery in 21 and 22. Sabi nila 21 should have a growth rate of 4.5%. Well, that is achievable because of the first 3 quarters our growth has been 5.1%. But there's no way our growth next year would be 7 to 9%. Well, maybe because of election spending. I don't know. And they're talking about accelerating vaccination. This study was brought out in the middle of September, just 3 months ago. All right. And they said, we are going to vaccinate 70 million by the end of 2021. By the way, as of January 17, 2022, we have only vaccinated 54.7%. So, you know, this shows the incompetence of the current administration, because the Asia as a whole is 58% of their population. Malaysia has vaccinated 78% already. Vietnam has vaccinated 70% already, and Thailand has vaccinated 68%. Okay, and then this is how a government agency tells the government very, very kindly, very diplomatically, we must manage our risks better, sabi nila. In other words, they think that we have heretofore managed our risks very badly. This is the diplomatic way of saying it. You know, opening economy safely, allowing selected family activities to resume, etc. And sabi pa nila, remember, the most restrictive community quarantines only postpone the surge. What will reduce the surge is PDITR. What is PDITR? It is prevention, detection, isolation, treatment, etc. Then they also say that what are the government recommendations for this horrible state of the economy? Implement the recovery program. In other words, the NEDA is saying you did not implement our recovery program well. In particular, the timely use. In other words, we did not use our recovery program timely, yung mga social amelioration programs. And then the second recommendation is work with Congress to refine the 2022 budget allocation and future budgets to address deficiencies investments in physical and human capital to close the gap further. That is what the government says as far as the economy is concerned. Now let's look at the state of the nation. What has happened? I don't know whether you know. I did this when I was doing extrajudicial killings, that the extrajudicial killings in the first 6 months or 7 months of this administration was already more than Marcos's in his 20 years of public life, plus Cory's extrajudicial killings, plus the extrajudicial killings under Ramos Estrada, plus Arroyo, plus Noynoy Aquino, put together, mas marami ang extrajudicial. Ayan ang state ng ating human rights violations. And there are other human rights violations other than just killings. And then the country seems to be desensitized already to martial law declaration because they declared martial law in Mindanao, even though it was not necessary. And then there's always revolutionary government threats. And this government has talagang blatantly courted the military and the police. That's the kind of thing that we just shut our eyes off. Aside from which you have the West Philippine Sea and China's influence, that too is a problem. And so we are talking about, well, aside from that, you have the president's vindictiveness and his crass behavior, behaving like a king, or maybe the better words is an autocrat instead of a public servant. This country has been going slowly towards autocracy. And moreover, the Philippines ranking in the worldwide governance indicators, the rule of law index, corruption perception index, talagang bumababa ang mga ranggo natin compared with our previous scores and relative to the rest of the world. Halimbawa, yung corruption perception index, mas mataas ang score, mas mabuti. All right? In 2014, we were 38. 85th tayo out of 174. Ngayon, nasa 34 tayo. Bumaba ang score natin, this is the score of the Philippines. And instead of 85th out of 174, we are now 115th. That is corruption. And governance and justice were the main pillars of the Duterte 0 to 10-point agenda. Ayan ang silang governance muna, tapos justice. Ito ang justice naman, rule of law index. In 2015, 0.53. The best is 1. 0.53 in 2015. We were 51st out of 102 countries. And we were 9th in the region out of 15. Pagdating ni Duterte yan, bumaba hanggang 0.46 na lang tayo. Diyos ko. you know what it does? These are, I don't know how many, 80 indicators, etc. And we are now 102 out of 139. Now that is the state of our nation. In absolute, and these are not done by the Philippines itself. These are done by outsiders. So there is no chance of having mga, we are trying to do this or we are trying to do that. All right. So as far as the state of the nation is concerned, we already talked about the state of the economy, the state of the nation. All of these seem to indicate that the Philippines has lost a part or all of its moral compass. We are immune to the crass behavior, to the killings, etc. Because somebody is always there making mura at us. So what are we going to do? Aside from, oh my goodness, I got carried away. Aside from the economic crisis we also have an education crisis, and we also have the health crisis, not only from COVID. That's the kind of state of the nation we have. All right? And then, here is what the government has said about education. Sabi ng, this is the NEDA study, sabi ng gobyerno, tayo lang bansa na nag-close ng face-to-face learning for an entire year. Tayo lang ang bansa sa East Asia. Actually, tayo lang ang bansa sa buong bundok. Globally, there is, tapos sinabi ng, actually, there is evidence that children are only mildly affected by COVID-19 and rarely infect their teachers. This is the NEDA study talking. This is not Winnie Monstod talking. And in the Philippines, only some 3 million households, 12.5%, total number of households about 25 million, have children and seniors living together. And this is how the NEDA is criticizing the policy. They cannot say, you've got a lousy policy because they're part of the government. And then due to lost income of parents and inability of some students, enrollment declined by 1.1%, around 1.1 million. Tapos, meron pang 865 private schools that have closed down. That is, I hate to be a nag, but this is NEDA talking about why there is an education crisis. And sabi nila, the online learning is only 52% as effective as face-to-face learning. Tapos do you know that only 18% of our households, the Philippine households, has access to online? Other forms of learning, modular, are even less effective than online. That is the education crisis we have. 60% of families have one parent who skips work to teach their children, and this results in 25% foregone income. And then, sabi pa ng NEDA, school year 21-22 has begun with no face-to-face learning still. And there is uncertainty when we will allow students to go physically. And the consequence of this, wow, less learning, lower future income, productivity, etc. And look at this. Sabi nila, the Philippines, according to the World Bank, our 12 years of expected schooling in the Philippines is equivalent to only 8 years of learning adjusted based on the results of international assessments. So it's not the quantity of schooling, it's the quality of schooling that's bad. And according to the ADB, each year of lost schooling translates to around 10% permanent lower wages in the future. And all this means that the pandemic and school closure, I would like to modify this. All this means that the pandemic and the incompetence of the government in handling it and school closure, including school culture, are exacerbating the already unequal access and lower quality of education. So it's not only income inequality that is being exacerbated, it is education inequality. between the rich and the poor. And this is the health crisis that we're talking about. Alam niyo ba, the consequences of the on overall health, consequences of COVID-19 and its mismanagement, that is my modification, ranged from the ating life expectancy noon, before COVID, 71 years for males, 77 for females. According to WHO, US CDC, this could be 1 to 4 years shorter. Tignan nyo ang permanent damage sa atin. Many people who recover from COVID experience other health concerns. Tapos many people who are become unable to work fully due to inability to get treatment from other diseases, because that study shows that the payments for treatment for other major diseases went down by 25% because there was no hospitals available to take care of them. All right, so we're talking about the education and the health crisis. We're not talking about just the economic crisis that the next president has to face. We're talking about the country crisis, including political, education, health. That's the kind of plate that the next president is going to fill up. I just wanted to make sure that we understood what that is. And the worst of all is that, of course, the poor. We're talking about, the poor bear the brunt of this crisis. As I said, the income inequality is increased. That's what Andrew said. The education inequality is increased. The health inequality is increased. And look at the population poverty incidence data. In 2015, our population poverty incidence was 23.3%. In 2016, 16.6% na lang. But in 2021, first semester, the estimates are the 23.7. Ang ibig sabihin nun, nawalaan tayo ng 6 years in our battle against poverty. Kasi ang ating poverty incidence ng 2021 is malaki pa sa poverty incidence natin ng 2015. Diyos ko. So, our major takeaway, first major takeaway, is the next president is inheriting a country which has lost its moral compass and is undergoing, according to the NEDA, which I agree with, an educational crisis, a health crisis, on top of the economic crisis. So when we say who can save the economy, that's not the only thing that the next president has to say. And with the poor bearing the brunt of all of this. So now we go. Which candidates have plans? Who can fix it? As I said, to fix it, you have to have a plan and you have to be capable of implementing that plan. You can have a good plan. The 2017-2022 development plan of Duterte was excellent. But as of last July, it was only capable of achieving, I think, 53% of its targets. All right, so let's go. Each one of them by alphabetical order, okay? Si Isko, kasi his surname is Dumagoso. All right. Ganda ng program niya. Bilis Kilos, 10-point agenda, which includes in the following order, the following: housing, education, labor and employment, health, tourism, creatives, infrastructures, digital transformation and industry, agriculture, good governance. Meron pa siyang EDI. You know that I did not know what EDI was, so I had to look it up. Ibig sabihin nun, equality, diversity, and inclusion. Very good talk. And pero aside from good governance, meron pa siyang smart governance. Alam niyo ba kung anong smart governance? Robotics. Ayan. Each topic of these topics, I got this from the websites, is followed by a one-sentence blurb. Example, housing. Ang blurb niya bahay na matibay, inaalagaan ang buhay. Nako. Tapos meron siyang before and after picture. Mr. Dumogoso's plan is beautifully worded, but there is no substance. Ping Lacson, naku naman, program niya, sabi niya, can be characterized in 3 words. It is concrete, implementable, that's fantastic, and future-proof. Wow. Tapos, it is anchored on bureaucratic and fiscal discipline, as well as leadership by example. Naku na, lindi. And all this will lead to good governance. Ang problema, hindi ko nakita yung concrete. Kasi wala akong nakitang programa. Wala akong nakitang, fleshing out. Ayun lang. I got this from I looked in the website. It was really a press release. That's it. So again, these are good parang sound bites. All sound and fury, signifying nothing. Pero at least meron silang sound bites. Ang website ni Bongbong Marcos, walang mention of any plan or any agenda or any program of government. At si Manny Pacquiao rin, no mention. His website, no mention of a plan, agenda, or program of government. It has a lot of boxing information though. And so we go to Leni Robredo's. So, and Andrew talked about it. And she has a 5-point hanap buhay para sa lahat agenda. Ibalik ang tiwala sa gobyerno. Gisingin ang lakas ng industriyang Pilipino. Wakasan ang diskriminasyon sa trabaho. And this is not just gender discrimination. This is age discrimination also. I loved it, obviously for obvious reasons. Suporta sa maliliit na negosyo and saluhin ang mga nawalan ng trabaho. She also, aside from that, she has a 3-point kalayaan sa COVID program plan. You understand, folks, that I think she was the last one to submit her presidency. And this came out like a week after or 2 weeks after she submitted. In other words, she had thought about what this country needs, and she had looked at and she had thought long and deeply, because both plans are fleshed out. It shows her knowledge of the problems. It even has a few targets and resources needed. I can only imagine how it will be fleshed out once it becomes a Philippine development plan. Pero yung 3-point kalayaan program niya, merong kalayaan sa pangambang magkasakit, and I love it that it is in Filipino, in Tagalog, so everybody understands. I didn't see the Tagalog in any of the other websites. Kalayaan sa gutom and kalayaan sa kakulangan sa edukasyon. And actually, the hanap buhay para sa lahat also has education in connection with employment. Both plans are fleshed out. I mean, sufficiently fleshed out, so you really appreciate the thought that has come into it. So, I mean, how can I be prevented from saying that Leni has the best plan? It is so obvious. I mean, it does not take rocket science to know that, hey, this lady has thought about it. She's actually looked at about it. Andrew has said some of has made points of some of her plans, but she has, for example, an unemployment insurance program. I've always wanted that. There never has been. In other words, if you lose your job and it's not your fault, people close down, you're going to be insured. And she's got some ideas, but she also said, I mean, not in that website, but in a discussion that we had in a fundraising, that this was not written in stone. I cannot fail to say that I do not agree with Andrew. Well, I don't agree with in several points, because Andrew did not mention agriculture at all, as if you can go straight to agriculture, to industrialization, without making sure that your agricultural sector is fine. And the mining, EO 79 said that the mining industry will not be opened unless reforms have been made, and reforms have not yet been made. I'm sorry. I just had to say that, and I'm glad the vice president did not mention mining, because that's a lot that has to be thought out with. So that's it. Only Lenny actually has a fleshed out plan, and it looks good. She has data. She has, I mean, I didn't even know that our hospital to patient ratio in the Philippines is 1 to 800, and she wants it to be lower than that, whatever. She wants to double the budget for agriculture, and this is where I have a problem, because she doesn't say where she's getting that money. Doubling the agriculture, doubling education, doubling health. I love it. That's where it's needed, but I don't know yet where the money is coming from, Mrs. Vice President, Mrs. Next President. Okay, now the next point is, which candidate can, and a different question is, which candidate will implement the plan? Well, I don't know what the other candidates will implement, because they have no plan. You see, isn't it obvious, mga kapatid, that these candidates were just dying to be president? They wanted the power. They wanted the presidency. My candidate thought about it and decided that she had something to offer to the country, and she is offering it. She's showing it. I only hope the country appreciates that. Well, which country will implement? To help me answer this, I used the Movement for Good Governance election scorecard. The Movement for Good Governance is something that I had, but it's actually Nene Guevara who heads it, which constructed to help voters in the 2010 election. And this scorecard was the first of its kind in Philippine politics. It is a simple and effective guide to evaluate the candidates based on 3 leadership criteria: their effectiveness in terms of their experience or whatever, and their empowering and ethical leadership. These criteria were initiated by MGG using diverse local international governance benchmarks from Gawad Galing Pook, from the World Bank, from the UN. And the scorecard was finalized with the assistance of the Personnel Management Association of the Philippines, the country's leading human resource agreement. And this is the scorecard. In English, can you read it, mga Sambayan? Okay, this is the English version. It also has a Tagalog version, by the way. The candidate have a program of government that has served the common good, the ability to lead a progressive country, the ability to lead a peaceful nation, a solid platform of good governance, a track record in good governance, that is competence, track record, decisiveness. Ayan ang, the second is empowerment. Does the candidate conduct and engage citizens in the formation of programs and policies? Inclusiveness, consultation, participation. That's what you're talking about. Does the candidate give inspiration and hope? Does the candidate empathize with marginalized sectors and give them opportunities to improve their and then the third is ethical. I'll try to make it larger nga. All right, the lives. Ethical. We're talking about integrity, stewardship, reform. Does the candidate demonstrate good moral character and the clean lifestyle? Does the candidate comply with laws, protect public treasury resources, and reduce corruption? Does the candidate have a clean, consistent, and transparent public record? Can you imagine? This was offered to the voters in 2010 and again in 2016. This is the 2016 version. And this is in Tagalog pa. Ang kandidato na may programang nakabuti sa mamamayan, etc., etc. And I did this. I leave it blank deliberately. So you, in the viewing this webinar, can rate your 5 candidates: Dumagoso, Lacson, Marcos, Pacquiao, and Robredo. I will not tell you how I rated anybody, except I will tell you, and I have no fears that I will be made wrong, that the 5th candidate, Mrs. Robredo, had a check mark in all the 11 criteria. The others had very little check marks in this, and some of them had, well, you know, what I did was cross it if talagang hindi, and then I put a wave, a cross mark, a check mark, and a wave mark. A wave mark if, you know, I wasn't sure. But this kind of scorecard, which the voters can do in as objective a manner as possible, is what is going to help us decide who the best person is, because we are trying to decide who the best person is. I'm sorry, I've already decided who the best person is, but I've undergone all of this. I mean, I did not only go to the websites, I went through as many sources as possible. And in Google, it is so easy. You know, you can see who were the ones who had cases against them, murder cases, etc. And then you have people, you see how people have lie, etc. So ang marangal, you know, malinis na pagkatao ay napaka-importante, at yung nagpapabigay lakas sa empowerment. May malasakit sa mahihirap at binigyan sila ng pagkakataong umunlad sa buhay. This is only one person got this check mark among the 5, because the vice president has actually had hands-on discussions with the poor, and her activities come out of those discussions. I am preaching to the choir, I know. So that is it. As far as program is concerned, Mrs. Robredo tops it, and as far as the capability and the willingness to implement that program is concerned, Mrs. Robredo tops it. So the answer to the question, Who can save the economy? Except my question became larger. Who can save the economy and the country? And that is my answer. All right? Ano bang nakalagay dito? Sabi ko, well, I use this scorecard, and with the caveat, this course that we give must be data-driven, or otherwise the exercise is useless. If you just say, basta, magaling siya, wala na tayong pag-uusapan. I'm talking about people who really want to make sure that their decision is correct. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much also, Professor Munsod, for that challenge. Ayan po, sinagot na ni Professor Munsod kung sino ang may pinaka-konkreto to address the economic and our problems here in the Philippines. Sabi nga po ni Professor Munsod, sana tayo lahat magkaroon tayo ng sarili nating mga scorecards, batayan, or objective na pamantayan sa pagpili ng ating kandidato. Let's take it as a personal challenge po from Professor Munsod. At sa ngayon po, to give us a synthesis or a summary of the talks that we had this morning, we call on BSP Deputy Governor Diwa Ginigundo. Sir, the floor is now yours.
Okay, maraming salamat, JP. What is clear from the presentation of our three distinguished speakers this morning is that we need to make a clean break from any semblance of authoritarian, dictatorial, plundering, incompetent type of governance. The economy, and for that matter, social, health, education, these are the direct casualties of misguided political economy that had enriched a few but impoverished the masses of our people and kept them away from an empowered participation in democracy. The May 22 election is the best opportunity to express this growing sentiment among our people that enough is enough. Tama na, sobra na. Kailangan natin ng tapat na pamumuno na ang kapakanan ng ating mga kababayan, lalo na ng mga mahihirap at kapos sa buhay. Based on our assessment, and Sambayan itself went through a very rigorous process of selecting from among the presidential candidates who would fit the bill of not only saving the economy, but saving the country, as Professor Winnie was telling us earlier. And only BP Lenny fits the bill. An economist, lawyer, and most of all, has the heart for the poor and a great commitment to clean and good government. Now let me just go through very, very quickly the issues that were raised by our three distinguished speakers. Una-una yung kay JC, no? What I would like to pick up from JC is that indeed, the claim that martial law years represented the golden years of the Philippine economy is not just urban legend. It simply falsifies both facts and history, okay? And both Professor Winnie, JC, and of course Andrew already showed us the facts in terms of output, in terms of per capita income, inflation, fiscal deficit, public debt, in terms of both public and private external debt. All of these are telling us that those martial law years were not the golden years, not the so-called años dorados. Before martial law, we know that between 1950 and 1960, the Philippines was one of the highest, had the highest real per capita GDP in Southeast Asia. But during martial law, naunahan na po tayo ng maraming mga bansa. Not only that, After martial law was lifted in 1981, it was superseded by economic crisis after economic crisis. Why was that so? Because the kind of economic growth that we had during martial law was courtesy of foreign loans and foreign loans. And most of these foreign loans did not actually fund the so-called current account deficit. Rather, most of them funded capital flight and, of course, the proceeds from crony capitalism. We had to declare a debt moratorium in 1984. We had to go back again to the IMF for a program for some measly $600, $900 million. You have golden years when you don't even have to request for restructuring of your debt, which we did, or to enter into another onerous arrangement with the IMF, which we also did. Our investment efficiency has gone down. Okay? Our productivity, both capital and labor, also came down. Clearly, there are leakages we saw during the time. Now, these leakages could have financed capital flight, as we were saying earlier, dollar salting, overstatement of imports, understatement of exports, and perhaps commissions or proceeds from corruption that were remitted abroad. That is not golden years. Most of all, social cost. How can one describe the martial law years when democracy suffered its biggest deficit? 3,257 were killed under brutal circumstances during that time. 737 disappeared without trace. 35,000 tortured cases, and 70,000 people were arrested, perhaps even more, mostly without warrant. If indeed martial law or the entire military dictatorship experiment of Marcos represented the golden years of the Philippine economy, then the Marcos regime should not have been overthrown by popular revolt in EDSA. Millions of Filipinos joined, both civil and political leaders, and even the military, to resist any further Marcos rule. So, it's true. Urban legend, fake news, ang golden years, ang martial law. On Andrew, we cannot disagree with his 5-point program. I think those are very specific suggestions on how to put back order in the economy, leapfrog the economy to industrialization. But of course, as Professor William was saying earlier, I think agriculture will also have to be given priority. Okay, and in previous sessions, Andrew actually described the Duterte administration as a tragedy. It was a tragedy because we dropped in economic competitiveness, economic freedom, corruption perception, justice and rule of law, gender equality, press freedom, and some more. I think Professor Winnie made that very, very clear. Right? For example, in terms of global competitiveness, we were 47th in 2015. We dropped in 64 to 64th in 2019. Ease in doing business, we were 95th in 2015. We dropped to 124th in 2019. That was before the pandemic. Corruption Perception Index, I think we have discussed that. Global Innovation Index from 83rd in 2015 to 54th in 2019. Now, on Professor Munsod, on who can save us, I think we cannot disagree. We agree wholeheartedly with Professor Munsod, because even Sambayan went through that process of looking at the platform of government, the issue of moral integrity, the issue of experience, competence, and of course leadership. And Sambayan came to the conclusion that only BP Lenny fit the bill. Okay. Now, in fact, Professor Monsod actually described BP Lenny as a game changer on the basis of, one, there is no hold over Lenny. Two, he's the only candidate with hands-on experience working with the poor and the marginalized. She has good academic background. She was not accused of anything like corruption, cheating, killing, or lying. And she could be the transformative leader. And finally, she is feared for her integrity and leadership. So again, maraming salamat sa ating mga kaibigan, sa ating tatlong magigiting na tagapagsalita sa umagang ito. Nakikiisa ang Sambayan sa ating pagnanais na magkaroon ng pagbabago dito po sa ating bayan. It is about time. Maraming po salamat.
Thank you very much po, Gov. Diwa. Ayan po mga kababayan, busog na busog tayo sa mga datos at patas na pagsusuri sa ating ekonomiya. Naway baunin po natin ang mga datos na ito sa pagpili ng ating susunod na presidente sa ngayong halalan 2022. Okay po, tayo po ay pupunta na sa ating open forum. Pero bago po ang lahat, pakinggan po ulit natin ang ating mga house rules po. Una po, para po sa mga katanungan, dalawang paraan po ito, raise hand at hintayin pong tawagin ang inyong pangalan o isulat po ang inyong katanungan sa chat box. Okay? Ang una pong magtatanong ay meron na po ba tayo from our members of the media? Kung wala po, magtatanong po muna ako sa Facebook. Gamit po yung Facebook. Okay? From Ellen Blanco. Kahit sino po sa ating mga speakers, pwede pong sumagot. Ito po yung tanong, babasahin ko lamang po. Paano makakaapekto ang bawat galaw ng mga involved? Ano ang impact ng bawat isa at ano ang dapat gawin para mahila pataas ang nasa ibaba, lalo na ang mga trabahador? Ano ang kontribusyon nating lahat indirectly sa pag-angat ng mga kapatid natin na kailangan bitbitin sa itaas? Maybe we can address this question po to Professor Monsod. Professor Monsod is still with us.
Paki-translate mo nga sa English muna. I
Okay
didn't
po.
catch it in Filipino.
How can we do our part in the national economy, especially those who are involved? What is the impact of our role as citizens, especially in lifting up those who are poor and the workers, the laborers?
Well, actually, in this crisis, the private citizens, the civil society has done so much. Actually, it has done, I would think, as much as the government, if not more than the government. Look at the community pantries. They did that. A single person did it and everybody followed. Hindi ba? In other words, the citizenry, civil society has done its share in trying to help, but it can only go so far. The government has to do it, has to help more. And the government, as a government agency itself said, it did not manage the risks properly, and it did not manage its resources properly. So, I mean, there's no question. We're going to do what we are going to do, what we are doing with respect to our people on the margins or the poor, but we need a government that will use its resources, use its ability to help them. And Lenny's government program, Hanap Buhay para sa lahat, will answer that.
Okay. Just a follow-up question po, Professor Monsod. You mentioned a while ago in your presentation that there is a deceleration of our economy during the Duterte administration.
Well,
But
yeah.
how would you explain daw po the consistent positive approval rate of the president despite this deceleration?
You know, I wanted to talk about that. I cannot explain it. I mean, the one possible explanation is that there are so many trolls, the social media is just full of disinformation and I don't know, wrong data. There is no question that Mr. Duterte has done some good things. Of course, there are positives and negatives. What are his positives? Well, he followed Aquino and Arroyo's program for the poor, the conditional cash transfer. That was not something that he thought of himself. That was thought of by Arroyo and made larger by Aquino, etc. He also passed the bill. I mean, approved the bill on tertiary education. I don't agree with how it's being implemented because I think that it should be targeted. The problem is that it's a divide by end situation. Those are some of the good things that he did. I don't think that his create problem or whatever the tax reform program was good. I mean, there was a column today by what's his name, the Australian Filipino. Oh God, in the Inquirer, saying that, you know, praising the Duterte administration to all, you know, like it was the best. I don't agree with that, but you know, I just look at the data. Why is it that the economy has been decelerating and yet the people approve of him? I cannot answer that. Nobody has been able to answer it well. And I'm saying that it's like, actually, it's, you know, it's like the Bongbong Marcos thing. You know, everybody knows, everybody who has undergone economics or followed JC Punang Bayan's speech, everybody knows that the Marcos administration was a disaster. And yet, why do millions of people want to vote for Marcos because he will follow his father's footsteps? My God, isn't that the same phenomenon? We've got to be able to find out how to beat that.
Okay. I think Mr. Jesus Abuda is raising his hand. Sir Abuda, please ask your question. Hello? Okay. All right. Okay, so maybe we'll go back po to the question of Mr. Abuda. Another question po for Mr. Andrew Masigan. This is the question po, Sir Andrew. Should a new government be in place after May 2022? Ano ang dapat na maging priorities para sa immediate recovery at long-term growth in your 5-point agenda? Should a new government be in place after May 2022? What should be the priorities for the immediate recovery of the Philippines? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I did make a recommendation, forwarded it to the office of Ma'am Lenny. I think if you talk about priorities, it's a whole package of things that we have to do. But there are two things that worry me the most. And one is the debt levels, which are now at 63-64% of GDP, which for me is, and for even credit rating agencies, are uncomfortable given our capacity to pay. And second is the budget deficit, which from 9%, it's going to balloon to 17%. We have to find ways to mitigate and balance the budget. And I did submit a package of recommendations to address this. But again, we have to abandon this whole Dutertonomics utang to death, no? Utang to death, fire the economy, consumer spending. It's not the way to go, okay? So if you're asking me what the first priority is, that would be it.
Okay, thank you very much po. Just a follow-up question from Rolando Narciso addressed to Sir Andrew Masigan and to Gov. Diwa. Any data daw po to show how much is lost to corruption every year, total amount in percent of GDP per capita equivalent? Thank you.
I wouldn't have the data offhand, but no, I cannot answer with hard data, but only speculation. No. So all I can say is it is perhaps double, in my own personal estimation, perhaps double or triple of what it was during the Pinoy administration, because now it's at all levels of the bureaucracy, and so I cannot give a solid answer, a concrete answer based on data. I don't have it.
Okay po. Sir,
There was a previous estimate of between 100 to 200 billion pesos lost on corruption alone, and that's so much of GDP. Now let me just react on the two most important issues that Andrew identified, and this is the debt level and the budget deficit. I agree. However, I think we need to see the nuance of those numbers. Okay? Because of the pandemic, it was necessary for government to borrow funds. And I think all across the globe, a lot of economies really borrowed funds, not only from the international financial institutions, but also from commercial sources. Because growth was down, there was recession all over the world. So revenues, so tax revenues or non-tax revenues were also down, and there's an urgency to buy health equipment, vaccines, etc. So the only way out really is to borrow. However, if we are able to recover, we can pay back. But the problem is this: at the same time that we were trying to mitigate the pandemic, there was large-scale corruption that happened, especially in the health sector. That's number one. Number two, in terms of infrastructure is very critical to ensure that growth is sustainable. However, we have to look at the quality of infrastructure. Tandaan natin, nung martial law, napakaraming infrastructure na isinagawa. Pero hindi lahat kailangan. And yet, they were nonetheless implemented, established, installed because they were a good source of commissions and kickbacks. So aside from really the public treasury funding in very critical infrastructure, okay, kahit na anong klaseng infrastructure isinasagawa. Kaya, and there are very limited resources. So I think we really need to prioritize. And over time, I think the credit rating agencies and even lenders of funds were more forgiving during this time, in the last 2 years, 2020, 2021. However, the problem is this: pag ito nagpatuloy sa 2022, 2023, 2024, if there is no restructuring of government policies, then yung ating tinatawag na debt spreads and the credit default swap will really go up and make borrowing both for government and the private sector really prohibitive. Thank you.
Thank you very much po, Gov. Diwa. Here's another question. Okay, Professor Musad.
I try to answer the question.
Okay.
How much the government? I did it this way. You know that in 1960 we were the highest among the ASEAN 5 except for Malaysia. And now we're talking about how much our Philippine GDP per capita is. In 2009, it was $2,838. If we had grown as much as Thailand, instead of $2,838, our per capita income would have been $10,635. That's a difference of almost $8,000. That's what we lost per year, per capita, from corruption. If we had grown as much as Thailand, if we had grown as much as China, our Philippine per capita income in 2009 would have been $24,000 instead of 2,800. Can you imagine? If we had grown as much as Indonesia, it would have been 7,757 instead of 2,838. This difference in growth rate is not all due to corruption, but 70% of it is. So you can imagine what is lost. I cannot tell you what the yearly amount is, but it is enormous.
Thank you, Professor Monsod. Here's another question from Lee Chipongyan of Manila Bulletin. Good morning. Professor Monsod and Governor Diwa both mentioned that VP Leni will be a transformative leader. In what way? It's also established here that she's the most economically viable presidential aspirant. Who would you compare her leadership to?
Who are you talking to?
And anyone can answer po. And anyone can answer. Maybe you can begin po, Professor.
I cannot compare her leadership to anybody because I think she's one off. She does not have any political baggage with her. You know, she's not corrupt, and she has, I mean, the likelihood of her being corrupt is rather small. I mean, her children are all professionals. She has no, she does not have the possible baggage of a corrupt husband or a corrupt son or whatever. Her moral compass is beyond belief. She is one off. She cannot be compared with anybody else. That's why I want her.
JP,
Okay.
I said VP Leni could be a transformative leader because she was able to capture the heart and the mind of the people. And this is based on the spontaneous volunteerism that he was able to trigger. Volunteerism. Ang mga tao, nagko-contribute ng sariling salapi para igawa ng mga posters nila sa iba't ibang lugar. We know this because Sambayan is all over the country, no? And there are reports coming to us. Okay? Bumibili ng gumagawa ng iba't ibang kampanya para makapag-raise ng fund at maibigay ito sa kampanya ni Leni. Now, wala si VP Leni ng bilyon-bilyon piso para sa troll farms, para doon sa mga caravans. But if you look at the magnitude, the size of the crowd, okay, that she inspires, okay, whenever she is around, andun yung spontaneity, no? And volunteerism was really terrific. I think if she could inspire this kind of volunteerism and initiative on the part of civil society, I think she could really be a transformative leader.
Sir Andrew, you might want to add something po sa question. How VP Leni could be our transformative leader. Thank you.
I think she is transformative in every respect. And I don't think we've ever had a leader with that kind of, with a package of attributes that she has. Number one, she's an economist. She understands about how the economy works. She understands the dynamics of interaction of the Philippines with the rest of the world. Number two, and I think the biggest thing, is that she is not corrupt. No. Number three, we know that she is going to defend Philippine sovereignty at all costs against China and against anyone who tries to breach our bubble of sovereignty. So I can't compare her to anyone, but I would like to think, okay, that under a Robredo presidency, okay, we can begin to really reestablish our institutions to make them stronger, correct the faulty laws and policies that are in place, and in other words, put the country on the right track for long-term sustainable growth. I think with a president with a moral compass to get these laws passed, will be a big boost for the country. Not the least of which is the anti-political dynasty law. Getting that passed, will need some from the top talaga, And I think only Ma'am Lenny can get this passed because she's not part of a dynasty in the first place. But yes, I think she has all the potentials to be the transformative leader that I've been writing about for the last 11 years. Thank you.
Okay. Just a follow-up question for you, Sir Andrew. You mentioned that we need to achieve a rapid industrialization in your speech. Would you agree that the country should also fast-track an extensive energy security electrical power program? Otherwise, the foreign investors' interests are dampened by poor energy resources, causing massive power outages. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. At the moment, we are plus or minus 10%, in our megawatt reserves, depending on the island that you look at. So definitely, this is part of the equation. And what I liked about the program of Ma'am Lenny is that she is very much for renewable energy sources, which I agree with. Although we know that this is a little bit more expensive than coal-fired, I think a balance should be achieved here, and this is what Ma'am Lenny is going for. But I do want to make a caveat to my presentation. With regards to what it may have seemed that I left out agriculture. It was actually in the program. It was actually in the program. I just didn't have the time to talk about it. But Ma'am Lenny was absolutely right in her Hanap Buhay sa Lahat program, where she said she wanted climate resilient and mechanically assisted agriculture. And I completely agree with this. There are certain areas that we can be very competitive in the agricultural realm, and particularly in agro-processing and in fisheries. I'm very much for that, although we all know that this comes with a lot of required reforms, particularly the comprehensive agrarian reform program must be rationalized, infrastructure towards capacitating the the agricultural sector, and reforms as well towards cheaper fertilizers, irrigation, and microfinancing for our farmers. So I absolutely agree that we cannot forgo the development of agriculture, but I do think it has to be mechanically and technologically assisted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andrew Masigan. For our last question po, para na po ito sa lahat ng ating mga speakers. How do we cascade the transformative leader concept to the masses? That's the first question. The second question po is this: how do we let the people know about the data presented this morning leading to VP Lenny as the best presidential candidate in 2022? Thank you.
I could answer that first. Okay. So if you look at the analytics, you'll see that the bulk. Okay, I can pull it up for you. I can share my screen if you want to substantiate this. But more than 58% of the voting public are from the D&E demographic. So this is lower income and poor. Okay, and this is also where Ma'am Lenny needs to sort of strengthen her position. Also, in terms of educational attainment, the data shows that the stronghold of the opponent, of the leading opponent, is in the high school or below high school graduate sector. Okay, so perhaps a messaging tweak to address the concerns of this demographic should be undertaken. Now, what are the concerns of this demographic? There are three. Number one is prices or inflation. In other words, that only means buying power and income. Unemployment is second, okay? And you see that with the high unemployment and poverty rates that we have at the moment, okay? And the third is, what was the third? Anti-corruption was the third, okay? So these are the concerns of the voting public. If only we can communicate a viable narrative, which this demographic can grasp and understand, I think that will go a long way.
Okay, thank you. Professor Monsod, you might want to answer the same question po.
That's the question I wanted to ask also. How can we do it? We have 66 viewers here, and I'm sure aside from the media, they are the choir. They don't have to be converted. We need to convert other people, and I don't know how to do it. Communications, I will say something, we have to have 10,000 other Lennys, and then that's capable of inspiring, because you listen to her and you get inspired. I don't have that ability, and I don't think many people have that ability. But as I said, I wanted to ask the question myself.
Okay, challenge sa comms team natin yan. Okay. Governor Diwa?
Well, if we have 66 people in the Zoom, and we represent probably 10 people in our household, okay? 60, 10, that's about 600. We can start the ball rolling. In Sambayan, we have thousands of organizations with more than 100 or 200 people each. Churches and other faith-based organizations are also potential spreaders, not of the pandemic, but of the truth. I think we need to battle post-truth or fake news by ensuring that we remain vigilant. Okay, we have to be opportunistic here. Every instance that we can have, let's spread out the truth. And what's the truth? These are things that we listen to today. And I think it's important that we get a glimpse of those facts and information, simplify them, and try to spread them out to as many people as possible. Now, the other point that I want to also emphasize is really the pandemic of disinformation. Okay, it is not only the C and D and E people who have bought into the golden years fable of the Marcos era, for example. Even A and B, okay, the leading candidate in the surveys is also scoring high, even in the A and B. In other words, even those with high educational level, those who have the money, they were also influenced in a bad way by fake news. So I think we could not overemphasize the importance of battling fake news by as much as we can, and let us leverage on our organizations in this endeavor. Thank you, JP.
Thank you very much, Governor Diwa. At dyan po, isinasara na po natin ang ating open forum. Ngayon po ay tatawagin natin sa muli ang ating mga speakers ngayong araw para sa kanilang mga closing statements. Wala na po si Professor JC Punongbayan because of another appointment. So we will begin po with Mr. Andrew Masigan. Sir?
Thank you, JP. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers of Sambayan for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to speak and address the group. No matter what, I still remain optimistic that good will prevail. Good for me represents VP Ma'am Lenny, and I believe that with our collective efforts, we can lead her to victory. So we just have to be consistent with our campaign and consistent with pitching in this effort of getting her into Malacanang, because we know that she can be potential to be the transformative president that we all have been waiting and need at this time. So thank you again. And yeah, one big fight, as I always say.
Thank you very much, Sir Andrew. Next is Professor Mansod.
Well, there's always, when I think about Mrs. Robredo, I think first of that picture of her when she was a member of the House of Representatives, standing in a gasoline station waiting for a bus to bring her back to Camarines Sur. I swear to you, which other candidate has ever done that? I remember watching the moving picture, something about the Marcoses family, where you had Bongbong being interviewed, and he was saying that he wanted to go home, but he did not want to go home using economy class, and he had to borrow money so he could go first class. My God, all I want to do is have somebody put those two pictures together to show you how many people, I mean, how many people will be convinced by that. I'm not a communications expert, but that should be brought out, number one. And number two, of course, the fact that Lenny has worked with the poor. She's the only candidate who has actually dirtied her hands, or made her hands, I mean, not dirtied her hands, but put her hands on with the poor and really talk to them. I cannot begin to impress on everybody how important that is, because a president should know what the poor are feeling. 58%, I know at least 22% are poor, 23% are poor as of this moment. And if they can only be shown that this kind of commitment to them is absolutely important. Otherwise, you're going to have somebody promising this, promising that, promising anything else. We have to break that. We have to break that, and Lenny can do that. And I agree with Andrew that we have to, Diwa, I agree with Diwa that we have to go out there and go door to door. Unfortunately, I'm already 81. I cannot go door to door anymore, but I hope all of you do. I will give you all the support I can get. You can want from me.
Thank you very much, Professor Mansod. JC Punong Bayan is back. Ito, si JC, pwede ito mag-door to door. JC.
JC.
Pasensya na kayo, nawala ako saglit. Meron pong unavoidable commitment. Pero I'm happy to share some final thoughts din po. Well, I think I fully support yung pong campaign ni VP Leni Robredo. Siya po talaga ang sagot moving forward. Ayaw na natin ng another 6 years of incompetence and bad policies. And at the same time, VP Leni really brings to the table a solid economics and legal background which will be necessary to craft policies to accelerate the economic recovery. And at the same time, nandyan yung malasakit niya sa mga mahihirap na talagang consistent over the years. And of course, finally, yung hands-on leadership na napaka-importante. Nakita natin na lason ang bad governance, especially in the middle of the pandemic. At yung good governance brand ni VP Leni is the antidote we need against that poison. So let's all support her.
Thank you very much, JC. Last po, Gov Diwa.
What is at stake here is our nation's destiny and the future of our children and our children's children. Let us not allow disinformation and fake news to influence the results of the next election. Let us fight to the finish, and let's support Lenny.
Okay, thank you very much po. Ayan, pakinggan po natin ang ating mga very inspiring speakers ngayong araw po na ito. At dyan na naman po nagtatapos ang ating Tapatan 1Sambayan. At kami po ay nagagalak na sinamahan ninyo ngayong umaga sa isa na namang mainit na talakayan. Nagpapasalamat kami sa mga miyembro ng media at sa mga nakasubaybay sa atin sa Facebook at YouTube para sa inyong mga tanong sa ating mga panelists ngayong araw. Kita-kits po tayo sa susunod na linggo. Ito po ulit ang inyong lingkod na si Attorney JP Calleja na bumabati sa lahat. Good morning po and keep safe.
Panahon na ng pagpili, panahon na ng halalan.
Madami namang kandidato, madaming mukha at pangalan.
Sino kaya ang bagay sa ating bansa? Hindi lamang forma at salita. Sino o sino kaya?
At sana kahit na sinong manalo, pagkatapos ng bilangan, sana naman ang panalo ay taong bayan.
Sino kayang mananalo at magiging totoo?
Sa pagnanais ng taong umunlad sa madaling panahon.
Sino man siya, pag-asa kaya ang dala.
Sana naman, sana siya'y tumira tapat sa bansa.
At sana kahit na sinong manalo, pagkatapos ng bilangan,